Welcome back, Mr. Goodberry. The First Star Logistics studio is fully equipped and ready to record.
What a bye week, huh? Somehow when your team doesn't play, still comes away feeling like a loss, especially after all of the AFC North rivals found a way to win, except for the Ravens, who looked tremendous. But this is Bengals on the Brain. I'm Joe Goodberry. The show is brought to you by First Star Logistics, as always, and they have a giveaway that's even maybe it depends on if you're more of a video game fan or more of a music fan. But last game was the NFL Blitz giveaway. This week is a custom jukebox, which is awesome and would be a great addition to anyone's man cave or wherever you hang out and watch games and do your thing. Make sure you get in on that description below here. So click down here. We had comments last week. Hey, how do I get into it? If it's not down below here, you can always go to Twitter, X, and go to First Star Logistics or Joe Goodberry or Malik Wright. We've all got it retweeted on our pages, and you will see it. You will find it if you scroll long enough or type or search long enough. It's the internet. You can find everything. But we got some news, notes, whip around of the bye week. What's going on in the rest of the league? What does it set the table for the Bengals as they gear up for their second half of the season, even though we got 11 games to go? The bye week here at week 7 gets the Bengals a chance to get healthy, get right, and make a run at this thing as some developments around the league set the table for that. And that's where we'll start, and that's where we will dive in as the AFC North went 3-0 during the Bengals bye week. The Ravens absolutely dismantling. I think people thought this might be the game of the week, Baltimore versus the Detroit Lions. Lions have looked really good. I saw on multiple shows and power rankings, people had the Lions number 1. The offense was humming on all cylinders. They could run the ball. They could run play action. They were getting a lot out of Goff and a lot out of Sam Laporta. And I think people were like, hey, the defense is legitimately good up in Detroit. This should be a close game. This should be a nice match to watch. But within like about one quarter, you could tell of that game, it wasn't going to go the way people expected at all. And I mean, maybe for us, the perspective is different. We have a healthy respect for Baltimore because we know, really without the injuries, they've had a good roster for like the last 5 years at least, if not longer. Got something blowing around here. And Baltimore's a really tough team and a very good, well-coached team. We know that. For me personally, I always find it funny when teams that don't play the Ravens often don't know how to react to Lamar Jackson. First, I think teams that don't play the AFC North often are shocked by the physicality, like instantly. Like all those games are bloodbaths. And I'm sure every division probably says this, but we know it's true, number one. Number two, the division's probably the best in the NFL. Again, others may say that. We know it's true. The AFC North is that strong. But you could see right away the Lions are like, whoa, this is an extremely physical team, number one. And number two, they were playing Lamar Jackson almost like, hey, let's keep him in the pocket and let's make him make throws from the pocket and let's make him make hard throws downfield. I don't know if you guys have ever watched Lamar Jackson before, but those are not his weaknesses. And especially this year, he is throwing extremely well from the pocket. He is throwing downfield better than any quarterback in the NFL. So if you're going to sit there and say, we're just going to not let him run and make him throw the ball, well, he will pick you apart. And he did. And then the few times they did try to send, once they were down 3 touchdowns at least, the Lions were like, all right, we can't sit here anymore. Let's send someone towards him. He burned him. He made that one guy miss, and he found guys on the field. So the Ravens look really, really good. And that'll be a challenge for the rest of the year to try and catch them, I believe. Other than that, though, the other 2 games were much more interesting. The Browns-Colts was back and forth, high scoring. The Browns have had the best defense in the league all years, historically great defense. The Colts, led by Gardner Minshew, were able to push the ball down the field, catch them on a few instances where it looked like the Browns weren't ready or had a bad play call, busted coverage, and they were able to push the ball and eventually score. And Minshew on his run was extremely nice and showed that maybe there is some cracks in the armor of this Browns defense. Anyways, it got really close to the end, mostly because Myles Garrett, who is the defensive player of the year. It's amazing to me that he hasn't won this award yet. TJ Watt wins it, and he's great. But in my opinion, Myles Garrett is the best defensive player in the league, and he's only been number 2 to Aaron Donald for like the last 4 years. So I think so far this year, based on what he's doing and keeping that team in it, is probably going to give him the edge so far. If you had to do it between or after 7 weeks now, you would give it to Myles Garrett. He blocked the field goal just jumping over the right guard. It would be not hitting the long snapper, not making contact with anyone. What a freak! Just a good player completely. He forced a fumble that was picked up. All this stuff. He was as advertised. But the game comes down to the end. The Browns are trying to drive the ball with PJ Walker at quarterback because Deshaun Watson was absolutely terrible when he played. Then he looked like concussion symptoms. He passed somehow, but he definitely looked like he may have lost consciousness for a second or two. It was in slow motion, so I don't know how fast it actually was. But horrendous calls, man. Horrendous calls. The Colts defense makes a play, looks like a fumble recovered by the Colts, and they're calling pass interference on a ball that lands 5 to 7 yards out of bounds. You see those little check marks where the media is allowed to go, and it lands further than that. You would have to be an insane player. You'd have to be Myles Garrett to catch that ball. No, you'd have to be Michael Jordan or something to get up there and snatch it one-handed and get both feet down. It's not catchable, uncatchable. So it can't be pass interference. People are going, well, then it should be holding or illegal contact. Not after the ball is thrown. If it's after the ball is thrown, it's either PI or it's not. And because it's uncatchable, it's not. So they called that. They get it at the 1. There was a couple other bad officiating calls. It's just like, what is going on? And the Browns find a way to win it, and they run it, and they score at the end. And then the Steelers game was a late slate versus the Rams in LA, and they get Deontay Johnson back, which I think is key to the Steelers offense because really, like with Pickett and Pickens, they're kind of feast or famine in a lot of ways down the field. They're not a high percentage or high efficiency, not getting a lot of yak with that combination. But when you get Deontay Johnson and get him in the slot and move him around, you get a higher reliability rate with him. You get a little bit after the catch with him. He's had his drops in the past, but I think Deontay Johnson's a good player. And the Steelers defense continues to be good, continue to be well coached. They haven't had more plays. They haven't had more yards. They haven't had a higher efficiency rating than any of the opponents they've played this year. Yet they're 4-2. And it came down to a final drive where they needed to convert on 4th and half a yard. It was. Looked like Kenny Pickett got stopped. They originally said he was stopped short. It goes up to review, and they say he got the first down. You tell me. It's crazy. So back to back, you feel like the refs just are way too involved, which is probably a whole conversation. And I could probably rant about the refs for another 10 minutes that I think most people would agree. And maybe comment in here how you feel about refereeing in the NFL today. I don't think it's an easy sport to do. There's a lot of rules. There's a lot of convoluted rules. A lot of fans don't even know the rules for certain things and situations that happen because it's not the same as when you played in school or in Pee Wee. It's not the same as college. There's a lot of old rules that get updated every few years and people don't keep up with it. So it can be very confusing. But having said that, I think most people would agree that we just don't want to see the refs. I don't care if they miss a holding call or if they miss a pass interference down the field. My first reaction would be the players got to fight through that and make a play. I'd rather see guys make a play. So when you don't call things, and sometimes they do that, right? They don't. You see a face mask, and you're like, why didn't he call that there? Whatever. Go on to the next play. And then there's a ticky-tack play later, and you call it. And now it may be a different ref that throws that flag. But I would like a standard across the board of we don't want to see or hear from you guys. If you don't call it, to me, that's better than over officiating a game, over calling a game, especially in crunch situations, critical situations. Just don't call it. Just chill and do that the entire game. Like that first 90% of the Bengals and Rams Super Bowl was just let them play. And it was an awesome game. And then as soon as they step in, it's like, and now we ended up on the short end of the stick, so I'm sure Rams fans may disagree, but as soon as they step in, it's like, let these guys play. Just let them play football. Let them compete for positioning of the ball. Let them compete in the air for the ball. Let them compete for the block, to get off the block, to make the tackle. you don't need to be involved. So, having said that, the Bengals are still fourth in the AFC North after the AFC handled their business. We've got a few other topics to get to. So, part of the effects of the AFC North rivals all winning this week and the Ravens looking as good as they have is that we have to start looking at playoff scenarios and what it may look like if the Bengals continue to struggle, especially with the next two games being the 49ers and then the Bills, right? You could, even if you split those games, that could be considered a success, but you're still only 4-4 at the midway point of the season. So at that point, we have to say if the Ravens continue to win, maybe the division could get out of the reach. It isn't right now, but it could get that way in the next 4 weeks or so. And if that happens, what does the rest of the AFC look like? We now need to expand our scope and our vision here on the rest of the AFC. And well, the Bills lost, the Chargers lost, the Dolphins lost, the Colts lost. These are all good things in helping uh, get you at least a wild card spot. Remember, 7 teams make it, 3 wild card teams will make it. And let's look at the playoff scenarios via the New York Times and what used to be not scenarios, but playoff odds, but what also used to be Football Outsiders and their DVOA and see where the Bengals rank in those. So looking at this now, the Dolphins have the highest odds. Dolphins and Chiefs, sorry, have the highest odds of making the playoffs, followed by the Baltimore Ravens. All of the division winners over 80%, including the Jaguars. In the South, the Bengals have been in this situation. It's not crazy to say they've got 80, 90% chances to make the playoffs. When you are 5-2 and better, 6-1 in the Chiefs scenario, you've got a great shot at making it. But let's focus on the AFC North as a whole. And the Browns are now sitting at a 63% chance. The Steelers at a 54% chance with that 4-2 record. And the Bengals at a 43% chance to make the playoffs. To win the division, it looks like the Ravens at 54%. We'll see how it goes the rest of the year. The Ravens have been in this position before. Then the injuries start to hit, and we see how it gets a little hairy for them once December and January comes. It has been like that almost every year. I mean, I think the Bengals went under 50% last year. Same story as they were 3-3, 4-4. So we will see if they can go on a 10-game win streak like they did last season. But to look around the rest of the AFC, really, it means you only have to worry about beating the Browns, beating the Steelers. You still have 2 games against them. And then that Bills game could really be key. And then can you stop the Texans from climbing into that discussion when you play them later this year? And the other one I wanted to bring up, which was from formerly Football Outsiders using DVOA. It doesn't like the Bengals a lot right now. It says they haven't been a good team so far, which is hard to argue with. But when you look at it through that prism of are the Bengals actually good, it says their chances of even making a wild card is 14%. They give them a 15.9% chance to even make the playoffs at this point. They are not very high on the Bengals making a little race or fight out of this thing. But again, that's based on how they've played. So hard to argue. They haven't looked very good. If they turn it on, those numbers will change and the percentages will get better for them, obviously. And now that we've recapped the AFC, the layout, the standings, and what it looks like going forward, let's rank the AFC teams from the bottom up. So 16 to number 1. Reverse power rankings, if you will. And I think these bottom teams here are the teams that probably don't have a shot this year at all. They, unless something drastically happens from this point, they've either lost too many games already or they just don't have the quarterback to ultimately push them where they need to go. So from the bottom, you've got the Denver Broncos, the Las Vegas Raiders, the New England Patriots. Even though they won to beat the Bills last week, division games, we know how they can go. I don't believe they have the quarterback to dig out of this hole. The Tennessee Titans, same issue there. They don't have the quarterback and offense to dig out of their hole. The Indianapolis Colts, you never win it with a rookie quarterback, so their chances are probably capped as it is anyways, unless Gardner Minshew goes on some Nick Foles type run from here. That would be unforeseen. I think the Houston Texans actually have made improvements this year. Quarterback actually looks good. But again, it's a rookie quarterback. Doesn't normally happen. And then you have the New York Jets, who clearly lost their quarterback week 1. They'll probably fight up until the very end, but ultimately fall short. The next group of teams are teams that could do it, could make some noise, could turn it on, probably need to turn it on just a little bit more for the teams that are at the higher portion of this section. This is the meat and potatoes of the AFC, and the Bengals are going to be in it. And those teams are starting at number 9, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I put them last of this grouping because I still don't believe they have the offense with Canada and Pickett to make enough noise. Maybe they'll turn it on. The Chargers need to find their way. They keep charging it up. I don't think they have downfield receiving threats. I don't think they have enough protection on the offensive line. And I don't know if Herbert can take it over enough when they need him to. The Jaguars have all those things, but then they're missing some on defense and missing guys that can take over those games. And the consistency still at quarterback is an issue at times for them. Now you've got our Cincinnati Bengals, and clearly I've got them at number 6 here, meaning I still think they're a playoff team. I still think they have one of the top quarterbacks in the AFC. I think they'll get it together in the second half. And maybe that's a little bit of faith. Maybe that's a little bit of seeing on tape and listening to interviews with Brian Callahan and other coaches and saying, you know what, I think they've got the right idea. I think they'll get it on track. Above them, though, I have the Cleveland Browns. Browns keep beating the Bengals, and their defense is clearly better. And if that's how they're going to win games, that's how they win games until they figure it out on offense as well. Very similar to all of these teams we're listing today. The Bills, normally a powerhouse, they are struggling on offense as well. They can't pass protect. They're not dynamic enough. They are not letting Josh Allen run the ball. They're not finding ways to use the intermediate part of the field out of their 12 personnel. They drafted Dalton Kincaid for that reason, and they are not using him. They got to figure it out on offense. And then the best of this grouping, I think, is the Miami Dolphins. But again, they're dealing with injuries. And I think this is a thing around the league where if you shut down a team's explosive run game, and their run game is explosive, that's why they're so good, they really struggle on offense. And then it starts to highlight their issues at quarterback and in structure and out of structure too, to be honest with you. We could do a whole breakdown of that offense. But I got the Dolphins here because they're not quite there yet. They've got to be able to sustain it for a full season. And then finally, we have the Baltimore Ravens at number 2. They've looked maybe the most complete team in the AFC, but I'm still going to rank them at number 2, and we've talked about them enough. They deserve the credit, but let's see if it lasts this year. Number 1 is still the Kansas City Chiefs, and this may be the best defense they've had in a long time. They've really done a good job crafting this defense and drafting the right guys and then signing the correct free agents. Like Charles Omenihu comes back this last week for them, and he plays defensive end, but also kicks inside, rush the passer. Looks really good doing that. Defense looks legit. And on offense, there's still an Andy Reid-led offense with Patrick Mahomes with a good offensive line, and Pacheco can do some things, and Kelsey will do his thing. The receivers, they got to figure it out. They're not, you can tell they don't feel as comfortable with those guys. 20-yard touchdowns down the field. I think Pat Mahomes has 2 this year. Lowest rate he's ever had in his career. You can put a lid on this offense. But can you score enough against them? So far, teams haven't been able to. It'll be interesting to see when that matchup comes up. What the Bengals, is that another 23-20 game? Could definitely see that happening. But I still think the Chiefs have to be number 1. I'd love to hear what you guys have. Who am I too high on? Who am I too low on? Where would you put the Bengals? Should they even be in the top 7? Would you have them lower? Would you have them higher? I don't think it's a great conference for all the talk of, hey, the AFC is stacked. It's going to be a gauntlet to get through. Doesn't look so hot or so hard right now. It's just, when you start off losing your division games to start the year, it puts you in a hole. And I think maybe the Bengals can get out of it, but it's definitely a challenge that's in front of them now. And that brings us back to setting the table for this week's game. The Bengals 49ers, NFC opponent. So is it going to kill you if you lose? Not in the AFC standings, not so much. But again, we have to watch. At this point, I'm recording this now. It's before the 49ers Monday Night Football game, which will give them only 6 days of rest and preparation for the Bengals, while the Bengals had a full week of rest here and obviously 2 weeks to prepare for the 49ers. So how does that affect the game? The 49ers are pretty beat up right now going into this game. Trent Williams, their left tackle, their all-pro, all-world left tackle, is doubtful. Deebo Samuel won't be available for the next 2 games. So that's Monday night. And then the Bengals game, they're going to hope to go into the bye week, get him healthy and get him ready. So the Bengals won't have to deal with that. That should be a plus. And Christian McCaffrey is dealing with an oblique injury. So he should be limited in some capacity by the time he meets with the Bengals. We'll see how the injury bug goes there. The Bengals coming off their bye should be a little bit healthier. T. Higgins should have had another week of rest now to deal with his rib injury, maybe get him back on track. As of Monday, though, Orlando Brown was not practicing yet. Remember, he was dealing with the groin, didn't finish the game versus the Seahawks. It would be nice to have him back and protecting Joe Burrow's left side. We saw how it affected him when we broke down the tape. If you haven't watched those yet, those are still available. They're still relevant. The Bengals haven't played another game yet. We broke down the tape on the offense and the defense last week in episodes 25 and 26 of Bengals on the Brain. But injuries, key for this one. But also, I think the 49ers, because it's the first time we're going to play an offense that's fully functioning, and there's only a few of them. Now, offensive scoring, offensive yards per play, everything is down. It's the weakest offense around the league in the last decade. Why is that happening? How can you avoid it? How can you be one of the few teams that are outliers right now, the Dolphins, the 49ers, and be a full functioning offense? And I think what they have in common, coming from the same tree, McDaniels was the run game coordinator and all that for the 49ers, is the running game and building off the running game and being a dynamic running attack. And I think people assume that it's just the running back, or it's just the offensive line, or it's just the running back's coach or offensive line coach or run game coordinator or Zach Taylor or Brian Callen. Sure, it's the full picture. It always is. It's never one thing. I mean, we highlight on the tape Mixon having issues. We've highlighted Chase Brown missing reads and not getting in there, which is a whole discussion. They need to get the backups more involved. They need some explosion. They need some speed. They need someone who can break a long run. They need someone who can make somebody miss from the backfield. Meanwhile, the running game has to be more dynamic. They're really only running out of the shotgun and running inside. So can you add more? They added a little bit more pistol to get a little more wide zone angles out there. Can they get under center coming off the bye week and run more play action and do more things out of it? The Dolphins, the Niners are getting explosive runs. And one's Christian McCaffrey's, right? So you got a tremendous running back there. The other ones are just fast for the Dolphins. And the scheme is having all these guys loop around and in motion and orbit motion and jet motion. And their offensive line is really not even good for the Dolphins. But then they get second level blocking and they spring these guys free, full speed after 4 yards, and they're ripping plays down the field. So getting explosive runs and getting them at a consistent level, not at 20, 25% success rate. I'm talking 40, 45, 50, 55% success rate could be big to the Bengals getting their offense back on track. If you want to separate yourself from everyone right now, you have to get your run game going. And I'm a guy that all the data and all the analytics show passing game is still what puts up points and what still will win you the most games. 100%. That hasn't changed yet. This year is a little bit different because there's been a cap put on passing offense. They're not letting them have these explosive downfield plays. So you have to be able to run the ball. And if you can run it with explosives, now you can balance it a little bit more and put up these points that other teams are struggling to put up, which means, can the Bengals do it? And can they get to that point? I don't think they have the scheme to do it. I don't think they call the plays and stick to the run and build off the run like these other teams do. But maybe at the deadline, we can look for a tight end. Maybe at the deadline, the Bengals can get another running back in the picture. And if you can, then you can vary up your personnel packages. You can add a little bit more speed to the backfield. And we'll talk about that on Friday's show. I'm going to put together a list of players, and we'll have some clips and some film, some highlights. Put together a list of players that I think you could target at the trade deadline to make this roster better, to compete this season, to maybe push you over the edge. And hopefully the Bengals win this week and you can really dive in. But all the 1-5 teams this week won and put them at 2-5. If those teams are 1-6, they're probably selling guys. You can probably go get a Hunter Henry from the Patriots. But with next week being the trade deadline, what if the Patriots win again? What if these 2-5 teams now win again? And they're like, hey, 3-5, and the Bengals lose and they're 3-4. We're in this. We're fighting for a wild card spot. It's gonna be harder to trade when you are down and the other team's feeling up. So something to keep an eye on the rest of the league. But this has been Bengals on the Brain. I'm Joe Goodberry. Thank you for watching episode 27, presented by First Star Logistics. It's been a tremendous time so far. I can't believe we're 27 episodes in already. We're crushing it. The numbers look great. Comments are great. Again, if you guys, because we're going to save this for the Friday episode, but I want to see the comments before I go to record. What would you target? And we're just going to use position. Give your explanation in the comments below. Just give me the position. What would you target at the trade deadline if you were the Cincinnati Bengals? And would you? Maybe there's some people that say, I wouldn't give up a fourth rounder. I want to give up a third rounder for a tight end, whatever it may be. would you do it, number one? And number two, what position would you target? And I'll look at those and may help me decide on how I want to handle the Friday's episode. Until next time, Uday.
Dave Lapham here, and every day I am grateful for my experience to have played professional football. As a player, I realized self-motivation, leadership, and appreciating your teammates are key. At First Star Logistics, you can use those same attributes to create the life you want for you and your family. Build your future by working hard like I did. You'll see results both on and off the field. Call First Star Logistics today and be part of our winning team.
Opportunity knocking.